So we're going to dig into just a little bit more here, setting up a DR environment. We saw one operate in the last session. Let's take a quick look at how to build one. So I'm going to keep hammering on this as a service. So on the left-hand side, I've got my on-prem vCenter environment, all right? And I want to build a DR solution with VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery. What I'm going to do is get the scale-out file system, get the orchestrator. The orchestrator is going to allow me to set up my DRAS connector into my on-prem environment. We're going to see that. Then I'm going to be able to build protection groups and begin protecting my on-prem environment into the scale-out file system as soon as that's set up. Now, to build a complete plan and to be ready for DR, I'm going to need to get an SDDC. And it may come and go. We deleted it in the last demo. We're going to have to recreate a new one so that I can set up the mappings and build the DR plans. All right, and with that, that's what we're going to cover in the next probably 10 or 15 minutes is building a DR environment, literally from the ground up. And I've already got part of one environment. You'll see in just a moment. So let's go ahead and switch out of this and into our demo here. Now, this is how we left things. This is VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery. I have my data center site one already set up, backing up or protecting with the snapshots to the cloud backup. The details of that we just heard about. You can dig into that in another discussion if you want. But what I want to do now is basically get my environment ready for DR. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get an SDDC. I'm going to do this separately. So let's go to the Recovery SDDC page, and I'm going to go ahead and deploy this from here. Now, remember the as a service aspect. I'm in VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery, and this is where I can get to my SDDC. So even though I need VMware Cloud on AWS as a capability, I don't necessarily have to become an expert in that to use this solution. So back to that simplicity, one of the questions that keeps coming up. I can do a single host, which is time limited, or multi-host. I typically use single host for demos and testing. We're going to scroll down here and basically tell VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery to deploy my SDDC for me. And what it's going to do is begin constructing that in my VMware Cloud on AWS environment, and it's going to create the live mount attachment of the scale-out file system. Right? This process I've sped up quite a bit because it takes about 2 hours from zero to being cloud ready to fail over. So my SDDC takes a couple of hours, all right, to get the first footprint up and running. Now I can expand that. I can add hosts. I can grow it as necessary. And if I wanted to, here I'm logging into VMware Cloud on AWS, and I can see the SDDC that's being deployed right now. So it's happening in the background. The two products are working well together. They're tightly coupled. I don't necessarily have to learn this environment to have my DR site. So let's go back to VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery. Speed this up a little bit. 2 hours have just about elapsed, and I should have an SDDC that I can now manage from my disaster recovery platform. This is where I can scale it up. I'm going to add some networks into it. I can manage my networks from this UI, and I just basically want to establish some things in the SDDC. Putting some information in here. We can deal with public IP address requests, NAT rules, firewall rules. I can manage my SDDC networking from here. Now, there's a couple of things I need to do inside the SDDC, but it looks like a vCenter to me. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the management console on my cloud-based vCenter, my SDDC. The passwords are available right here in the UI, the orchestrator UI. So I can shortcut these, put them in my 1Password, whatever, but they're available there. So like I said, I really don't have to go back and forth between tools. Here I am in the SDDC. Looks like a vCenter to me. I'm going to create some resource groups, all right, and some folders here, because this SDDC comes up basically empty and day one. I want to construct it a little bit differently because it's going to make a big difference when I go do my DR plan mapping, which we'll see in just a few minutes. But here I've created a resource group. I'm going to create a couple of subfolders, and my networks are already managed from the SaaS orchestrator. So just another moment here. So create an applications folder just to kind of show you some of the actions that you would go through as an administrator of your DR solution. All right. My vCenter in the cloud is already built. I've got my folders constructed. And now what I want to do is switch back to the UI. Click play here. And continue constructing this. Now, we have a protected site already. We saw this is data center site 1. I want to create a new one. Let me jump ahead. I clicked the wrong button there. Okay, so our SDDC is built. That's all good. Let's go now and, all right, starting off back at the top again. In my cloud services portal, I'm going to go to my VMware Cloud DR, and we can see now I've got the purple DR SDDC that we just built. And it's attached in that light blue bubble around it with the dashed line. That's essentially my live mount. Now let's create a new site. We want to build this from scratch. Data center site 2, put it on the west coast of California. And we see here, when I drill into that one, it's not configured. I've got all the information that I need to configure this. So I'm going to grab the OVA link. I'm going to go to my site. This is my on-prem vCenter at site 2. And this is standard OVA deployment. Nothing really special here. I'm going to make one pause at a moment because I want to talk about one thing. So we're deploying a stateless appliance VM that's our connector to the cloud. All right, we'll kind of click through all of the steps, put it wherever we want. All right, the one thing that I want to make sure that you understand here is the network that this appliance sits on. All right, it's pretty typical, but it needs to talk to the vCenter, the ESX hosts, and be able to go from prem to cloud. So this is one aspect where I might have to sort of tie the two pieces together. I mean, the as a service is great, but as an administrator, I still have a few steps. So that network, my VM network, actually sees what it needs to see on-prem, and it can talk to the cloud components, the scale-out file system and the orchestrator. It installs here. I'm going to power it on in just a moment, and then we're going to finish the final configuration, a few easy steps. And then we will be able to begin protecting our on-prem vCenter workload environment. So in just a moment here, I should see it register. It picks up an IP address. I'm going to go ahead and use that IP address to finish the registration. I open a console on that OVA that just got installed. The VM is running. The password, if you were paying attention, is actually back on the little dialog sheet that we saw. All right. I'm going to use DHCP. It's working in my environment. Now, this is the path to the orchestrator to finish the setup. And this is where the credentials, those credentials will get changed in a moment. That's the default initial credentials. Excuse me. But we're going to put in the fully qualified domain name of our orchestrator. We're going to go get a passcode, which resets every couple of minutes. So the one that I'm going to paste here is already long gone. All right. And the OVA is now initializing itself, connecting to the orchestrator, and becoming part of VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery Solution. All right. So we had those three components we talked about: the orchestrator, the file system, and the DRAS connector. All right. In just a moment, we'll have that piece stitched together in our UI, and we can do a quick refresh of the UI here, and we can see now our DRC-4 connector is available. I can add more of those if I want. What I want to do right now, though, is register a vCenter. This is the on-prem vCenter that I want to protect. My solutions lab, admin Mike, that's me. And now our vCenter is registered, and we can now go to the step of creating a protection group, the third step. And this is essentially the policy for snapshotting and protecting those. So I'm going to call this test. It's on data center site 2. I'm going to use a simple VM naming pattern. I believe I've got a VM there called base something that we'll use as an example. So yeah, my base development worker VM, I'm going to use that just basically to get through the construction here. I'm going to do a nightly backup default. We'll talk about the details on that a little bit later. But now I essentially have a protection group built. All right, there's nothing in here. What I want to do is take a manual snapshot, and I'll just keep this one for a week or so. And this now runs in the background. This is the first snapshot of the virtual machine from prem to cloud occurring. All right, it takes a couple of minutes depending on its size, seeding the scale out cloud file system, but we can now see a little bit later, we have one in inventory. So in our protection group, I have a point-in-time recovery, at least one, and it has my base development worker in it. So now I'm able to go build a DR plan and actually test this out if I wanted to. All right. So let's go to our DR plans. I've got some already created, but let's create a new one. I'll show you how simple it is. We'll create a test plan. This is a test demo, kind of what we're doing right now. I'm going to use protected site 2 that I just created. All right, a new site to my DR SDDC. I'm going to use that test protection group that I just created that has the one virtual machine, one snapshot in it. All right. I'm going to go through a couple of mapping steps here. All right, mapping the vCenters, the folders. Remember, I created some folders on the other side. I'm going to map those back and forth. So I'm going to map DevOps in prem to DevOps in the cloud. And that's a simple one for me. I'm going to map compute resources. This allows me to really decide where those workloads are going to fail over to when they go to the cloud. This is all just part of the mechanics that get built into the plan. They get regularly checked by the health checks. All right, virtual networks. I'm going to put my VM network on my cloud DR network. That was the one that I created through the UI. All right, very simple setup. I'm going to skip through IP addresses and scripting. That's a much more detailed topic. Recovery steps. These can be simple or robust. I'm going to recover the entire protection group, test one. I'm going to choose to power on. So I have power on and power off controls as well as pre and post action steps available here. So as I build a plan, I can be very specific about the order of events, or I can be very general about grab it all. The last little bit there was some alerts. I don't really want to get any email alerts from this particular exercise, but now we have our test plan created. So we've created the site, the protection group, we've created the test plan now. Since it's a brand new plan, its first health check is being run. The continuous compliance, a little blue spinny circle there. It's going to give me a green check mark. Right? This is run every 30 minutes by the orchestrator, but I can do this manually anytime that I want. All right. So I now have basically created a complete environment. I've created my SDDC in the previous step. And if we come back up to the top here now, we see our topology. I've got data center site 2 added to my topology, backing up to my cloud file system, connected to my SDDC. I've got a protection group that I've defined test that's up and running. And I've got a DR plan that is in my inventory now. And we can see that it's ready and it was checked 4 minutes ago in this case. All right. So in this kind of walkthrough here, I mean, I went fairly quick, but it really is that simple. And I stayed either in a vCenter environment that I was familiar with, or I used the VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery solution to build out basically from start to finish, the SDDC, a protected site, protection groups running SLAs. I can go back and modify those if I want, add more virtual machines up the schedule, and a DR plan, at least an initial one, for failing that one over to that SDDC that I just created. All right, and I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions. I know we went through that pretty quickly.
So there's the option to power on what's already on or power everything on or not power anything on at all. Can you tell it in order of operations to power things on?
Yes, so if we skim back to where I had the steps, right about here, all right. I'll come, oh, no, right before that. Give me 1 second. I'll bring up the screen because it's a lot easier to describe when you're actually looking at what the options are. So the answer is yes. So here I picked the step. Now notice I can add steps. All right, on this screen, it was one recovery step. I can add additional steps. All right, and those steps can be complete protection groups, individual virtual machines. I have the power action choice. So I might say, if it was running when we snapped it last, please bring it back online. Or I might say, do not start this virtual machine when I fail over. There might be reasons I do not want that thing to start up until I have eyeballs on it. All right. Now, and I also have pre and post actions, and I want to kind of touch on those just briefly because we skimmed over it a little bit in the material. But there's pre actions. I can run a script in the environment if I want to. So I actually have an external scripting capability. So not only can I pick the order, the sequencing, the granularity, but I can also have each of these steps in my plan reach out to my environment and do something that the SaaS orchestrator may not be designed to do right now. All right, so maybe it's to run something in the virtual machine or run another process in the environment or check on something that we haven't integrated into the environment yet. All right, so we can have fairly simple and fairly robust disaster recovery plans. This one was just basically building the environment. It was a single plan, single step, just power them on. All right.
So there's I have a question to jump in here with. There's a lot of other moving parts when you want to fail over a data center, underlying services like DNS, potentially load balancing, changing firewall rules and things like that. Is that where those pre and post scripts would come into play, or are there other integrations to make those changes?
So I'm going to say it depends. Failover is a complex thing. All right. Here I have just one group in this plan. All right. I could have, if you look, it's a little hard to see because it's grayed out, but to the left, I have a basic infrastructure plan. I have multiple protection groups that are bringing on my databases, my web servers, doing different things. So depending on how I set up my environment, I may, in a failover, bring on group one and get it all working, put a pause in there, have somebody check on it before I move on to group two. All right, so I can put multiple protection groups into a plan. And then when I get to the steps, I can sequence what they're doing. So I can have SLAs to do that. Now, there are some things that we're not going to do. We're basically bringing the VMs out of the live mount into inventory and powering them on. What they do is up to your environment, or what they call is going to be part of the failover. So setting up things like DNS firewall rules, things like that, that would be a great extension for the scripting capability if it wasn't already in the infrastructure coming up. And I know that's a little bit of a hand waving because DR is a very complicated thing, but what we're trying to do is get the workload into the cloud and get it powered on and get action to it so that as an administrator, I can now deal with the sort of intricacies of how I've wired my environment together.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where the best place to automate what can be automated, if it's here or if there's some other script or orchestration tool that would kick this off, as well as some of the others. Like, would this be the leader in that, or would it just be one cog in the wheel?
Yeah, it's actually a good conversation for cloud footprint. We have some customers, what they do is they establish a pilot light in the cloud. And in those couple of hosts, they actually build the core pieces that they need, and they have that always stitched together. They'll do layer 2 stretched VPNs. They'll do a number of things between prem and cloud so that that part is already working. And then what they need to do is bring over the other 10, 100, 1,000 virtual machines that make up their data center. So that
just died a little inside when you said layer 2 stretch from on-premises to cloud.
Yeah, there's a number of ways to do it. It partly depends on what the last thing you want to do is build a solution that's completely dependent on your physical data center and have a component there not be reachable, even in the cloud. So you got to look at what your strategy is, build the two environments, the prem and the cloud, stitch them together. You might need a small footprint in the cloud always running for that to be truly effective. Or maybe it adds another hour or so to the recovery time because you bring up the SDDC and you got to do a couple of changes, and then you can start to bring over the workloads. So there is this difference between infrastructure and workloads and the hybrid cloud aspects. And that's all part of, those are the hard things. What we're trying to do is make the bulk of the workload fairly simple to execute.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just trying to figure out where it fit in.
Good questions.
Talking about the integration, Mike, is it integrated with the NSX?
When you say integrated with NSX?
Yes. Suppose you have the on-prem and more complex situation where you have already set it up NSX with the firewall rules, routing, and whatever. Are there any integration in order to have the quite similar situation in on cloud?
So not specifically in the orchestrator or the plans. In our environments, we typically will run some aspect of NSX on-prem, and some of it's already running in the SDDC, and that's how we deal with sort of network separation, network connectivity. So I'm going to say it's a qualified yes that it operates with NSX, but there's nothing inherent in VMware Cloud DR that says this has to happen in NSX for it to work.
Okay.
So to continue on that, the setup for NSX and all the parts that need to be configured for NSX needs to be done on the customer side as well.
Yes. Yeah, the customers are going to need to basically set up any of the prem to cloud networking, understand how that is. The disaster recovery plans are going to provide the mechanisms for stitching that together. I'm going to, as soon as I find my, I'm going to stop sharing here. And
can you elaborate a little bit more about the needed bandwidth? Because I heard you say that, yeah, it takes a few minutes. I think you mentioned 4 minutes to move that vCenter copy to that cloud data center. But I can imagine that if you want to move over a few VMs with some terabytes of data, that it will take longer than just a few minutes.
Yeah, the initial seeding of the cloud file system may take a little while. It really is. It is your mileage may vary, and a lot of it depends on the bandwidth you have between your prem site and the cloud. Now, in this case, I set up one DRAS connector. All right, I can set up multiple ones of those to help move a little bit more workload, but ultimately it's going to be tied to the bandwidth that you have between the two sites. And the initial seeding could be the sort of long pole in the tent, but once that's there, the change block tracking and the incremental snapshots make that very expedient, and that's kind of what goes through. That's one of the reasons that the 4-hour RPO SLA is in place right now, because that equation can be quite different depending on the capacity and the change rates between the two sites.
So, of course, if you have an RPO of 4 hours, there will be more data that has been changed compared to 5 minutes, let's say. So also there, it will take longer to get the data over there. So why not put it lower?
There's always a little bit of a trade-off there, and that's something that I know that our engineering team is working on and kind of watching the evolution of this product. I think Nabil may be talking about that a little bit more, or we can dig into it in more detail later. But the change block and the overwrite rates, granted, 4 hours might be a larger payload, but it's going to get compressed and efficiently moved than if I was doing that every 5 minutes. But at the end of the day, there's kind of a daily change rate that has to be absorbed, and your network has to be able to support that.
Hey, Mike, how does this affect your partners? You guys have several partners that are doing this right now. So how's this gonna impact them?
I'm not quite sure I understand.
Disaster recovery as a service,
right?
You have other partners that are doing that, kind of.
I mean, David,
providing their own DR sites.
Yeah, I would say, David, as VMware, we've always been a platform company, and so as a platform company, you've always have the dual dynamic of both maintaining an open ecosystem, but also identifying ways in which we can deliver, a more streamlined, integrated solution for someone who says, look, I've got vSphere on-prem, right? VMC is where I want to go. VMware, if you offer a solution, we're interested in it. I would say I'm a long time vSphere guy myself. And so it's not that much different than, any sort of platform play where we have that duality of support the ecosystem, but at the same time, when we see opportunities to deliver additional value to customers, we'll offer a solution there as well.
So for example, we used to be outside of VMware, Datrium, just 6 months ago, and we were good partners. And they had others. VMware also had other solutions, but we were part of the ecosystem. We were part of the ecosystem, and that's generally how we look at it as well. Ecosystem makes the platform bigger and better for our customers.
And we continue to support, enhance, evolve our integration mechanisms with our partner ecosystem of backup and DR solutions, including in VMware Cloud and AWS.
I'm curious how this is going to integrate with other products in the VMware portfolio and how this will expand. For instance, SRM is still a thing, and people like to do site-to-site protection as well as site-to-cloud protection. So is it possible to use this cloud the scale out file system on-prem? Would it be possible to do a site to site as well as site to cloud type protection through the same portal, still using that DR as a service control plane to control both of those aspects? Those are the sort of things that I, as a business, would want to see in a product, that it cover more than just this one very specific use case of my VMware to AWS.
As Mark was saying, we do have VMware strategies to do multi-cloud, to kind of be the arms dealer, be the ubiquitous multi-cloud story. And then on-prem is definitely part of that. So yes, our current offering is focused on AWS, but we firmly believe in the multi-cloud story as well ourselves as a team, Datrium team. So as you know, we have to see how this goes in the near future, and maybe we can, when we have more, we'll share more as well.
And Ned, when you say, about site to site, right? Absolutely, there are customers in which that is still critical. And that's why Site Recovery Manager, I think we introduced it back in like 2009. That's still a very robust enterprise offering from us to meet that customer need. We are interested in looking at ways that we could bring a more unified experience, in the future, in which we have a solution that can cover not just what VCDR can do today, but also cover some of those other deployment scenarios, right? We think that's very interesting. But, right now, especially since it's a new service, focus is key. So we didn't want to try to stretch into too many use cases. And so that's why you see us being very clear about what we can do today, what we don't do. But from a unified experience point of view, very interesting, right? I'll just say something that we are actively looking at.
Also, focus is important in the sense that delighting customers. And so if you look at some of the themes we have, like data integrity, how we do compliance checks and simplicity of SaaS. So we really care about delighting customers. That's the only way we're going to win in the new world, right? People need to be delighted. And so focusing on that for now, for one single, like you said, on-prem to Amazon cloud, that is really important, that we nail that and we nail all aspects of it before we do more broader and broader things. Because otherwise we'll just spend our time thinking of bigger pictures, but never actually nailing that solid one thing. If you do one thing solid, then the foundation is really, can we build upon that to do other things.